Man, the environment is so ripe, dude. The people are agitated. It's actually shocking how the endless torrent of hate did not cause Zohran Mamdani to lose votes at all.
Tangent to that discussion right there. I still want to talk about Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee to be mayor of New York City, but I want to focus on a little bit of an exchange he has had with President Trump, because President Trump yesterday was asked what would happen if Mamdani stood in the way of ICE arresting undocumented immigrants or apprehending undocumented immigrants in New York City. I want you to hear what the president said and threatened, and then I want you to hear the response from the Democratic nominee for mayor.
We'll have to arrest him. A lot of people are saying he's here illegally. He's, we're going to look at everything.
An attempt to focus on who I am, where I'm from, what I look like, how I sound, as opposed to what I'm actually fighting for. Because to do so would be to display the stark contrast in our sincerity and actually delivering for the very working people who've been left behind by our politics.
It just so happens that that interview that you saw with Zohran Mamdani was conducted by Errol Lewis, part of an extensive discussion last night. So, Errol, what do you make of the back and forth here and how each of those two gentlemen are positioning themselves?
Well, John, good morning. As is often the case, what we have is a Republican who wants to beat up on a Democrat and sort of demonize him and use it to rally the Republican base and raise money and do all kinds of things. And frankly, Zohran Mamdani can kind of do the same thing in the opposite direction. Donald Trump is very unpopular in New York City. He lost New York City twice when he ran for president, even though this is his hometown. And Zohran Mamdani is aware of that. And it never hurts a Democrat to bash Donald Trump. And so I think we're going to see a lot of that going back and forth as each tries to exploit the political vulnerabilities of their.
Dude, what a psychotic way to approach this. Dog. Donald Trump, the current president of the United States of America, is saying he's going to deport Zohran Mamdani. That is not an exploitation of anti-Trump sentiment. That's someone who should not be receiving this line of attack at all. Like, what kind of cynical assessment is this, brother? Are you crazy? Donald Trump, the president, who has already started a Gestapo-style reign, a fascist regime of immigration enforcement priorities that he is continuing in spite of tremendous public pressure and resentment, is now saying, I'm going to put crosshairs on the dude who won the Democratic primary. He's Muslim. He's scary. I'm going to do the same racist shit that I've been doing that is incredibly unpopular to a singular force because he won an election. That's not someone cynically using Trump's statements against him. Holy
their adversary.
Margaret, it sounds like what Errol's saying is you have a president who wants to bash a Democratic candidate and a Democratic candidate who wants to be bashed by the president, in a way.
Yeah, and to Errol's point, they do both get something political out of it. There's another trend developing, too, where we're seeing the president talk more and more about this idea of, forcing denaturalization, trying to really test the limits of what he can do as the executive in terms of the immigration status or the citizen status of people who were born in other countries, became U.S. citizens, did the things that are so often talked about as playing by the rules. You wait your turn, you study what it means to be an American, you take the citizenship test, you do all the right things, you become a citizen. And increasingly now, he and the Justice Department are talking about increasing denaturalization for naturalized citizens who in some ways are seen to have sort of betrayed U.S. ideals. And right now, this is to some extent rhetoric, but we have actually seen a huge uptick since the beginning of the first Trump administration, since 2017, in the number of cases being discussed for denaturalization. You saw him sort of float this as a threat against Elon Musk, who, of course, is originally from South Africa, when now that he is tangling again with the president. So I'd keep an eye on that also.
That's a really interesting point, the comparison between Elon Musk and Zohran Mamdani and the mutual threats made against each of them there. Errol, just one more point on Mamdani. For all the differences between him and President Trump, there's also some really interesting similarities in the way that they campaign.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, both of them focused on affordability with an almost obsessive focus. And it's really very interesting. We're looking at the numbers. We just are getting preliminary numbers, but there are some Trump Mamdani voters out there. We've identified some areas of New York City where they went for Trump just a few months ago, and now they're voting for Zohran Mamdani. And it's a wake-up call, really, to both parties, that something that will go beyond any other kind of traditional political consideration is that gnawing feeling of not being able to pay your bills on a daily basis. The voters have signaled every way they possibly could that will override almost every other consideration, and politicians ignore that reality at their peril.
Margaret, I want you to weigh in on this, but also I want you to weigh in on this new social media post from President Trump on this huge bill that could get a vote in the House today.
Hakeem Jeffries. Response to Donald Trump's statement: as president of the United States, I'm not going to let this communist lunatic destroy New York. Rest assured, I hold all the levers and have all the cards. I'll save New York City and make it hot and great again, just like I did with the good old USA. Hakeem Jeffries, stop lying about Assemblyman Mamdani. He's neither a communist nor a lunatic. And New York City doesn't need to be saved by a wannabe king. Besides, you're too busy destroying America with your one big ugly bill to do anything else. Yeah, Trump needed to simply call him a dangerous radical a Hamas supporter or something that wants to globalize the intifada, or an enemy of Israel, for Hakeem Jeffries to not be able to launch any attacks against that, All right,
Good evening. Welcome to Inside City Hall for Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. I'm Errol Lewis. Zohran Mamdani has won the Democratic nomination for mayor. This comes after the city's Board of Elections tabulated the ranked choice voting results earlier today.
Eric Adams declines to comment on Trump's threats against Mamdani when Kelly Mena asks, suggests it's a distraction. They're going to have a mic in my face. Are you going to do this? Are you going to do this? Let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to deliver for New Yorkers. Nice.
Heading into today, State Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani led with 43.5% of the vote after the first round votes were calculated. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo.
The Democrats want to make the idea of Trump deporting Mamdani to be a point of weakness to convince people to not vote for him. That is incredibly cynical, and I hope you're not correct. I didn't even think about it like that, but I don't know. I mean, if they don't actually aggressively push back against the Trump administration for saying this, and simultaneously draw home a larger point about how Trump is using immigrant enforcement as a mechanism to basically rid the country of people he doesn't personally like, whether it be your neighbors who happen to not have the proper clearance, the proper paperwork, but have been authorized to live here and work here, while simultaneously claiming that they're like dangerous criminal threats, or whether it be the person who won the New York mayoral primary on an agenda not dissimilar to Trump's, which was affordability, which Trump seemingly has not solved for New Yorkers or any other American anywhere else. This is the advocacy from the Democratic Party. They should be doing this. And the fact that they're not doing this is a little bit alarming. But considering that there are Democrats, or enough powerful Democrats, who have actually, said positive things about Mamdani, I don't suspect that to be the case.
Trailed by about 7 points. But then after the votes of all the other candidates were redistributed, Mamdani increased his margin of victory and came out on top with 56% of the vote. Joining me now to talk more about that is the Democratic nominee for mayor, Zohran Mamdani. Congratulations to you, and welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So, look, in late March, which almost seems like ancient history, an Emerson College poll showed you getting the support of only 10% of voters. What happened over that successive 90 days?
We just kept building this campaign with the relentless focus on making the country's most expensive city affordable for the people who make it so special. And ultimately, we built a campaign unlike that which has been seen in our city for many years. We had more than 50,000 volunteers who knocked on more than 1.6 million doors, who made more than 2.1 million phone calls. And we had that coupled with the hunger across the 5 boroughs for a different kind of politics.
He linked up with the Hasanabi broadcast and the Chapo broadcast. Okay. Podcasts have motion. I was wrong. That's what happened.
And that's what we showed over the 8 months. And, it seems like a long way from the 10% you're speaking about, Errol, but it's even longer from where we started in October, where we were at 1% in the polls. And frankly, that's being charitable to ourselves.
Well, at what point did you realize that this wasn't just growing, but that it was going to carry you to victory?
We spent so much of these 8 months outside speaking to New Yorkers wherever they were. And there was a moment where more and more people had heard about our vision, and where more and more people were finishing my sentences when I was speaking about the platform of freezing the rent or making buses fast and free. And that was when we started to realize that, in fact, it wasn't even just going to be the same electorate as 2021. This was going to be a new electorate, one that looked more like the city itself. And that had long been a goal of ours, because it is all too easy to say that democracy is only under attack from authoritarianism from the outside, when in fact it's also under attack from a withering faith from the inside as to its ability to not only relate but respond to the most pressing crises in working people's lives. And so fewer and fewer New Yorkers have been participating in that democracy. And we had looked at 2021 and how only 26% of Democrats had turned out at that time, and 74% stayed home. And one of our hopes was to get more New Yorkers to register to vote, to get more Democrats to come out and vote in a primary. And some of the most exciting aspects of these results were the fact that we changed the nature of this electorate. We brought so many more younger voters in. We brought so many zero prime voters, as they're described. And we even saw the voter registrations in the last 10 days of this primary changing from about 3,000 to more than 30,000, and that being indicative of more people seeing themselves in our politics.
So I'm sure some strategists told you along the way that this is one of the hardest things to do, right? On the other hand, it's strategically, I guess, common sense. If you play by the old rules with the old electorate, Zohran Mamdani loses. If you redefine the game and bring in new players, you have a shot at winning.
And I think we were told that by many in the beginning, and I understand where they're coming from, because frankly, the idea of redefining the electorate has been spoken about many a time, and it's very difficult to do. And what made it possible was that we were not doing this alone. There were so many incredible partners in this fight that were speaking directly to the New Yorkers who've lost the most faith in local politics to actually be able to deliver in the crisis in their lives. And ultimately, the most powerful messengers in speaking to New Yorkers are New Yorkers themselves. And we found that so many people came out to vote because of a conversation they had with a canvasser at their door, because of a phone call they received, because of a moment that was far more.
Man, the environment is so ripe, dude. The people are agitated. The people recognize that that change is a necessity. It's actually shocking how the endless faucet, the endless torrent of hate did not cause Zohran Mamdani to lose votes at all.
Reflective of their life than the way in which they had engaged with politics before, in 30-second increments on their television screen or in mailers.
I feel very hopeful.
Oh, talk a little bit about what life has been like, not just today, but even since last week. Who's reached out to you that may have surprised you? Who got your phone number that you never in a million years thought would call you?
I can tell you one of the most enjoyable surprises was on election night getting a phone call from Mayor Wu of Boston, because I had long looked at that moment when a number of mayors across the country went to testify in Washington, D.C. And the one that I wished most was our mayor, was Mayor Wu, and looking at the way in which she's led that city, and also her passion for making buses free there as well. And the results that we saw in the number of routes that she made free, especially Route 28, were inspirations for what we've sought to do here. And in that conversation, and in the many that I've had with so many incredible leaders across the country, there was a real understanding of the partnership that this city could have with so many others looking to showcase an alternative to the politics we've seen in Washington, D.C., politics of exclusion, when in fact what we need in this moment is a politics of the future, where we not only recognize the belonging of each and every person that calls this city their home, but deliver for New Yorkers to actually have somewhat of an easier life in a city that they can actually afford.
Well, okay, there's at least one political leader who you heard from and about today. I'm sure you've heard it, but let's listen to some of what President Trump, the President of the United States, had to say about you, and then I wanted to get your reaction.
Mr. President, your beloved New York City may well be led by a communist soon, Zohran Mamdani, who in his nomination speech said he will defy ICE and will not allow ICE to arrest criminal aliens in New York City. Your message to communist Zohran Mamdani.
Well, then we'll have to arrest him. Look, we don't need a communist in this country, but if we have one, I'm going to be watching over him very carefully. A lot of people are saying he's here illegally. He's, we're going to look at everything.
Much of that, of course, was false. But I'm particularly interested. This kind of wild talk can actually result in harm in the real world. I was wondering, I guess, first your reaction and whether or not the NYPD has assigned you any additional security.
You know, I'm lucky to have security throughout the day, and I appreciate the work of the NYPD.
It's time to crusade Iran and Gaza. Mamdani communists. Let's go to war against the left. Hasan Piker getting beat up soon. Mamdani is such an idiot. We will fight the left before they elect the communists. Every infidel shall be treason. Mamdani for treason. Hasan for treason. Okay, chatter.
And making that a reality for me, but also a reality for New Yorkers at large. And ultimately, what we're seeing in President Trump's rhetoric is an attempt to focus on who I am, where I'm from, what I look like, how I sound, as opposed to what I'm actually fighting for. Because to do so would be to display the stark contrast in our sincerity and actually delivering for the very working people who've been left behind by our politics, compared with what President Trump has been able to do. You know, over the same period of time that I've been running has been the moment where President Trump ran a presidential campaign premised on making life easier for working class Americans, on making cost of living that much lower, on actually having cheaper groceries. And he's been unable and uninterested to deliver on any of that, instead focusing on cruelty in the manner that we've just heard today. And what I would tell him is that the last person who couldn't get my name right, we defeated them, and that's what it's going to look like again.
Okay, fair enough. As you may have heard, a number of business leaders in the city have been meeting in a state of, I would characterize it as panic. I'm not sure if they would agree, but they seem to be trying to rally support for Eric Adams or even for Andrew Cuomo or anybody in order to try and stop Zohran Mamdani from becoming the mayor. What would your message to them be?
My message would be,
oh, you found his account.
Today,
guess who he's a fan of? Awesome. First time catching him on Lamau, the infamous chat.
But the ping hasn't really affected my gameplay at all up until this point. It has been mine.
Bro, it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny how this dude who is advocating to for treason is mad at me, okay? Is mad at me and doesn't realize that Trump is going to cook his family. Okay? Trump is going to destroy this motherfucking family. Like your grandparents and all of the people that you love and cherish are going to get fucked over with this new Trump tax cut. That's crazy to me. That's something that I'll never understand. That was supposed to hurt, get beat up enough in 2020 when we dragged y'all. Uhuru. Lol, I'm actually in Singapore, buddy. He said Uhuru. He already got site-wided. Oh, yeah, they already got clapped. Of course they did. They told a Twitch streamer that they are going to be.
That I'm excited to meet with them. I'm excited to speak with them because ultimately my vision for this city is one that includes all of us, and that includes these same business leaders.
Crusade LARPers are so funny. They're similar to leftists who LARP about filming a Walmart while being afraid of turning on the camera in a Zoom call, but at least the leftist LARPers pretend they're fighting for a better world. Crusade LARPers are such losers that their entire fantasy is about dying in a battle for a world of losers. Or rather, they are also in line with like the government, you know what I mean? They're like, more of this, please. That's what they keep saying. They're like, I love that the government is doing this. More of it, please. I would like more of that. He said Uhuru.
Who are concerned. And I will speak to them about my proposals, my fiscal policy that I've put forward, and ultimately that my vision of this city is one where everyone will thrive. And I think what is incumbent upon me to do over these next many months is to showcase the fact that we're looking to build a coalition, not simply of the New Yorkers who already voted for me, or the ones who will even vote for me in November, but a coalition that looks like the city itself.
Uhuru is a call sign for the Boogaloo Boys movement, the short-lived Boogaloo Boys movement of LARPers who look exactly like that one dipshit that we were looking at, who wear Hawaii t-shirts and fantasize about a race war.
And that includes New Yorkers who today have concerns, New Yorkers who have questions. And ultimately, I seek to be a mayor that will actually be there, who can answer those questions, and a mayor who can even be yelled at and take it, because frankly, that's what it means to be a New Yorker. And so I'm excited to have the chance to speak to business leaders. And I've been excited over this past week to have a number of conversations where I've laid out why I believe in the things that I do and how everyone has a role in actually bringing them to fruition.
Are they right to be afraid that you're going to hit them with taxes and regulations that make it significantly harder to do business here?
They're not right to have a fear about the difficulty of doing business in this city. Actually, we put forward a proposal to make it easier, especially for small businesses, to navigate through the bureaucracy of city government and to actually cut fines and fees in half. And my proposal is to raise the state's top corporate tax rate to match that of New Jersey, to raise income taxes on the top 1% of New Yorkers by just 2%. These are proposals that will actually make it easier even for business leaders to operate in this state and in this city, because of the fact that it will make it easier for them to attract and retain talent. So many of the incredible businesses across these 5 boroughs are built upon the work of New Yorkers who today cannot afford to live in this city any longer. And if we allow this city to become a museum of what once was, it will actually threaten the ability of anyone to do business across these 5 boroughs.
I mean, one of the things I find really striking is that there are versions of what you've been talking about on the campaign trail that have already been tried. Like, we've had at least 3 years of a rent freeze under de Blasio. We've seen that if you wanted to sort of increase taxes on the very wealthy, something that Eric Adams, in fact, promised to do 4 years ago, there have been at least half a dozen bills. I saw your name on them. A bunch of them have already gone up to Albany. Most of them died in committee. But it's not like this is a brand new conversation in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think that's what really grounds this platform. Is it's a platform that is not just urgent, but it's feasible and it's grounded in precedent. As you've said about the rent freezes, but also when it comes to making buses fast and free, that's based on the results that I saw personally as an assembly member alongside Deputy Majority Leader Mike Gianaris when we delivered the city's first ever fare free bus pilot. And we saw that ridership went up by up to 38%, that assaults on bus drivers went down by 38.9%, and that the largest number of New Yorkers in terms of income categories that saw a ridership increase were those making $28,000 a year or less. And when I speak to business leaders and I speak to them about their concerns, one of them that I also hear is about public safety. And that's the opportunity when you're having that conversation to showcase how so much of this agenda also addresses many different aspects of that, while also making clear that police have a critical role to play in creating that public safety. And we're going to allow them to focus on the jobs that they signed up for, as opposed to continue to ask them to play the roles of mental health professionals and social workers in addition to that which they're already responsible for.
Okay. I guess a final question. Your election attorney, Ali Najmi, was here recently. He said that you've been having meetings with some Jewish community leaders to try and create a connection, clarify where you're coming from on the subject of Israel and some other topics. Have those discussions been productive as far as you're concerned?
Absolutely.
It's an interesting way to ask that question. I don't think they have, but...
And they are discussions that I'm excited to continue. They are discussions with Jewish community leaders, with rabbis, with elected officials, and ultimately they are discussions to showcase that even where there is disagreement, there is always a shared sense of humanity. And my commitment as the next mayor of this city is to protect Jewish New Yorkers and to deliver on the number one priority of those same New Yorkers, which I've heard time and time again, is ensuring that this city is affordable. And I am excited at using every single tool at city government's disposal to address all of those issues and ensure that every single New Yorker sees themselves in our city government and in the results that we can actually deliver.
Okay. Well, once again, congratulations. We'll see you out on the campaign trail. We've got a fall campaign, and we'll talk about that at another time. But today, of course, is a day for you to, I guess, savor the victory and get ready for the future. Thanks for coming by.
I'm not going to go through this whole thing. It's 36 minutes long, but I guess there's like a part where
the
he talks
presumptive
about...
Democratic...
He talks about Islamophobia.
Was very clear in the weeks before, and the days after the primary was this barrage of racist, anti-Muslim attacks on you, equating you to a terrorist, saying you're a danger to the safety of Americans, especially Jewish Americans. And I'm going to repeat some of the attacks, not because I think they're okay to say, but I want listeners to understand what's being said. And it's not just from the right wing. and Republicans in office. It's also from other influential figures. Deborah Messing of Will and Grace posted online that you sided with terrorists and you celebrated 9/11. You were 9 when that happened. Republican Representative Nancy Mace posted a picture of you in your Eid outfit and wrote, "After 9/11, we said never forget. I think we sadly have forgotten." Republican Representative Andy Ogle called you Little Muhammad and said you need to be deported and is calling for your denaturalization. Were you prepared for this level of bigotry?
It's unsurprising, and yet it's still deeply saddening. And it's unsurprising because, as many Muslims in this country know, to exist in public life is to have to deal with this kind of slander at a different scale. And it's part of why so many have thought that the safest place to live is in the shadows. And so much of my hope for this campaign was to bring the margins of our city into the mainstream. It's been very difficult to see just how much of this hatred has been normalized. And as you've said, it's not just Republican congresspeople, it's an actress of a show that I used to watch as a kid. And I think that ultimately my responsibility is to show that our vision for this city, it's a vision that is universal. It's a vision that wants to recognize the belonging of each and every New Yorker. And it's in stark contrast to this exclusionary vision that we see from so many. One that seeks to distract people from an inability to take care of working people by designating the enemies as the other. And one of the most difficult parts of this, however, have been that the threats that have been made on my life and on people that I love are ones that fundamentally transform how you can live.